Okay, before we get into it, there are a few things to be considered when talking about training for longevity. What is longevity? The definition is long life or long existence, which is great. I've actually been listening to a great podcast about longevity, and it's been talking about the possibility of being able to live for hundreds of years, which is kind of exciting. But anyway, I'm talking about how do you make the time you do have here as awesome as possible? How do you stay healthy, stay strong, stay fit, and improve the quality of your life, reducing the risk of injury, and probably add a couple of years to your life? How do you live the best possible life you can for as long as possible? No one wants someone wiping their ass for them. And this may not seem something like you need to worry about because you're 32 and in your prime. And it's never too little too late. But if you start thinking about these things now, you'll likely not have to worry about them later. Training. I'm purely talking about training here. There are a bunch of other areas that you can explore to prevent disease and improve the quality of your life. Things like sleep, nutrition, supplementation, hot and cold exposure. This is training. I'm purely talking about training for longevity. This is not a bash on any other form of training. I've identified as a CrossFitter for almost 15 years. I own a CrossFit affiliate and have done for the last 5 years. This is purely understanding the right tool for the right job and making sure your training choices are in line with your training goals. Which is where we'll start. Why? Why do you train? What is the sole reason you wake up at shit o'clock and drag yourself through an hour of punishment at the gym? Why restrict what you eat and pay thousands of dollars a year in gym memberships? Why? If your training goals are something along the lines of, I want to be stronger, I want to be fitter, I want to live a healthier life, you want to keep up with your kids and be around for them longer, to not get injured, to grow old and not worry about falling over and busting your hip, and the chances are your training motivation is in some way, shape or form related to longevity or have at least thought about your long-term health, and it is up there somewhere when it comes to your priorities. If you fall into the above category, then you really need to ask yourself, do I need to be doing loads of kipping pull-ups and thrusters? I'm not saying you need to quit CrossFit and you should give up playing rugby. I'm saying if you are not a professional athlete and your training goals aren't to play in the FA Cup final, then why are you training like they are? There are ways you can train and enjoy training whilst giving yourself the best chance of building a really, really tall head so you can live a better life for longer. Working hard in the gym and creating adversity will 100% improve your quality of life. But there is a monumental difference between working hard and doing 300 kipping pull-ups in a week, you know? Next, intensity. Training intensity can basically be classified into volume, how much work you do in a day, week, month or year. Load, how much weight you carry in a lift, set, session, week, month and year. Frequency is how often you train, and then duration, how long you train for. These are all variables that you can manipulate to control your intensity. Training at really high intensity creates stress. Stress is very useful for creating adversities that the body has to adapt to. These adaptations make you stronger and more resilient so you can stay healthier for longer. We want stress. However, too much stress can cause adverse effects. I don't really like saying training too hard, but if you are training harder than you can recover, you increase the risk of joint deterioration, inflammation, and a whole bunch of adverse training effects that will essentially break you sooner rather than letting you live better for longer. You can use all of the variables I mentioned earlier to prescribe the maximum recoverable training volume to ensure you're making progress now and in the future. Okay, exercise selection. Which exercise and implements we use is another way we can maximize on our long-term training progress. Compound list, think big multi-joint exercises like back squats, deadlifts, and bench presses are amazing for getting stronger and building more muscle. The more resistance or weight, the greater the strength adaptation, and the greater the strength adaptation, the more muscle you build, which is very important for long-term health. Arguably the best way to lift more weight is a barbell. It's a more stable implement, so you can divert more energy into the lifting part versus the stabilizing and balance, which for its intended purpose of building strength is awesome. However, and it is a big however, I believe it's fair to say with heavier loads and less flexible movement patterns, there is more room for compromised movement. Opting to load certain movements with dumbbells, kettlebells, or even sleds gives you more access to your unique movement patterns that a barbell might not. Think about the freedom you have doing a dumbbell bench press versus a barbell bench press, or the positions available with a goblet squat versus a back squat, and how much friendlier is a walking sled push versus a deadlift. You don't have to avoid the barbell. Dead squats and benching are great tools for building strength and muscle, which as we age become really important. But stay open to swapping out some barbell movements every so often. Dumbbell for barbell bench press and overhead press, sled push instead of deadlift, or even goblet squat instead of back squat. Keep your options open. I promise you your joints will appreciate it. Probably should have started with this one, but warming up, this applies to everyone, but especially as old folks. Preparing to exercise drastically reduces the risk of injury, meaning you can work out more, building more strength and more fitness to bulletproof yourself for years to come. If you get injured, you can't train. If you're not training, you're not moving. You stop moving, you die. Warming up also allows you to get more from your session. If you are tight because you're old and you didn't warm up your hips properly, you need to build slower on those first 3 sets of squats, and you're only getting the intended stimulus from the last 2, you're leaving loads on the table that you could have taken had you been better prepped. Same goes for cooling down. Sitting on the machine for a couple of minutes or working through some mobility work after a session has been shown to improve recovery. The more recovered you are, the better you feel and the better your next workout is. This is a really cheap win that everyone can do tomorrow and maximize on your training sessions. In summary, exercise to build strength and improve cardiovascular fitness to reduce the risk of disease and delay decrepitude. Manage your intensity to allow for the maximum recoverable training volume. Vary your exercise selections. Dumbbells and sleds instead of barbells sometimes will keep your joints happier for longer. And prioritize warming up and cool down to maximize on your performance and reduce the risk of injury. Slide into my DMs if you've got any questions, and go and live a long and happy life.